The MLB season is just around the corner. And so today I'm going to give you my 3 biggest hot takes regarding the MLB season here of 2026. And New York fans, you're not going to like this episode, so you may want to stick around. Hope you guys do enjoy this edition here of Chase's Sports News. I am your host, Chase Coburn, here with you today. Again, 3 bold MLB hot take predictions or maybe just ideas ahead of the 2026 MLB season. And it's a great time of year. Baseball coverage, March Madness, NFL Draft, NBA playoffs. There's so much to break down, and you're not going to want to miss it right here on Chase's Sports News. Please be sure to subscribe. We're looking for 2 to 3, possibly more uploads in terms of long-form videos per week and about 7 to 10 shorts on your feed every single week. So really hoping to aim for consistent quality content here on the channel, and we're going to be covering this MLB season in totality, and you're not going to want to miss that. So please be sure to subscribe and do what you need to do to keep up with the content. Follow me across all platforms so you don't miss anything. All right. I teased it at the beginning. I told you, New York fans, you're not going to like this. I'm going to have the New York teams almost bookend the episode. We're going to talk about one at the beginning here and one at the end. First, I think the New York Yankees are going to finish 4th in the American League East and miss the playoffs in 2026. I know that that's going to be a bold prediction because the Yankees are one of the World Series favorites. And it may sound insane because of that, and I understand why you're going to say it's insane. The Yankees are always constantly a premier contender in Major League Baseball. I'm not denying that. But I'm just not buying into the vision in 2026. For me in sports, you're either getting better or you're getting worse. And I've seen it across all sports. And the contenders that don't seem to do much to improve the team are those that take a step back. And the Yankees proceeded to do little, if anything, whatever you classify, this offseason, simply just re-sign some new players. And I think there's so much dependency for this New York Yankees team on players who I don't know are going to meet up to those expectations. I don't trust this lineup outside of Aaron Judge. I think Ben Rice can do some good things. I think they have a few guys in that lineup that can make an impact, but there's such a dependency on these older players, the Paul Goldschmidts at 38 years old, the Giancarlo Stanton at 36 years old, the Cody Bellingers at 31 years old, and that rotation is very injury prone. We don't know exactly when Garrett Cole's going to come back. We trust Max Fried, but this rotation has never been able to stay on the field consistently, and that's been a big issue for this Yankees team consistently. Not to mention they're shifting closers yet again. Bye-bye Devin Williams. And so, look, I'm not denying what Aaron Judge can do. I've already said Ben Rice is a really solid first baseman, but there are so many holes in this lineup, and I think you got really just Grisham out there in the outfield for fielding purposes. And you have Anthony Volpe and Ryan McMahon. And really the infield has been one of the worst performing in Major League Baseball the past few years. So you have an inconsistent injury-prone rotation, a dependency on older players in the lineup, and overall just a very injury-prone team that continues to disappoint in the playoffs. I don't see the vision, and I think in a tough division where the Baltimore Orioles got better, where the Boston Red Sox got better, where the Toronto Blue Jays got better, at least made some moves to try and get better, and when the Tampa Bay Rays got better, everybody else in their division got better. While they just kind of brought back the same players, still are very dependent on those older players who exceeded expectations last year. I doubt they're going to be able to do that again this year. In this tough division, I just don't see it for the New York Yankees. And so, again, for me, the team that won 90-plus games last year, it was because Paul Goldschmidt was very productive. It was because Cody Bellinger was very productive. It was because Giancarlo Stanton was very productive in the time he was on the field. Can we, when they're both 30, or all 3 of them are 30 years old or older, specifically Stanton and Goldschmidt, who are way up there and you're 40 years old, can we expect them to play at that highest level consistently again? I don't think so. And genuinely, I really think that this team is one Aaron Judge injury away from the entire thing blowing up. And again, I don't make my predictions based off injuries, but it is something that you need to consider when you're analyzing an MLB team. And consistently, Aaron Judge has missed time, and he has gotten a lot better, but in his career, he has been injury prone. This rotation has been very injury prone and very inconsistent. Who says Carlos Rodon's going to stay healthy? Who says Garrett Cole's going to stay healthy? Who says Luis Gil's going to stay healthy? And so I trust the health. I question the health is a concern to me. The dependency on older players, that's a concern to me. And being in a very, very tough division, that is also concerning. So I think the Yankees are going to finish 4th in a really tough AL East. They're going to miss the playoffs. They're going to fire Aaron Boone after the season and finally begin to retool things significantly next winter. The Yankees have been running it back over and over and over again. I think it's finally going to catch up to them, some of these weaknesses that I have pointed out, and I think it's going to culminate in a very disappointing 2026 campaign. That is right. The favorites out of the American League by most metrics missing the playoffs this year. That's a bold one, right? That's a fun way to get things started here on Chase's Sports News. Secondly, I think the Athletics have a chance to be a playoff team and have a chance to be a scary team in 2026. I'm not saying that they are going to be. I'll set the record straight right now. I am not guaranteeing that the Athletics are going to be a team that makes the playoffs because there are some weaknesses on this team that we haven't been able to see them take that next step yet. But I think they have the construction of a roster that can take that next step, and I think it could be this year. I think they have a young core that is poised to get better after they won 76 games last year, which was a big improvement from 24 and 23, where they were one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball. I think the offense proved that they were competent last year. They were 5th in batting average. They were 7th in home runs, 8th in OPS, and 12th in runs. And what's so fascinating is they had the headline stars, which I am going to break down, but it was also a well-rounded machine. I talked about being 7th in home runs. That was 3 players with 30 or more home runs and 5 players with 20 or more home runs. So they have talent up and down this lineup. I'm looking at a guy like Nick Kurtz, who is the reigning Rookie of the Year. Silver Slugger at first base. Hit 36 homers last year. OPS above 1,000. He's a guy who can make a serious impact with this team next year. Jacob Wilson, 2nd in Rookie of the Year voting. He was batting .370 at a point in June, and while the wheels started to fall off toward the end of the season, he's proven he could be a competent bat in that lineup. Tyler Soderstrom is a more than respectable outfielder who had great stats last year. Brent Rooker had nearly 90 RBIs last year. And so it wouldn't shock me with that core, plus now adding Jeff McNeil for pretty much nothing. He's not what he used to be as a batting champion, but he's a solid infield piece to a core that can already mash. It wouldn't shock me if the A's have one of the best offenses in the majors this year. It's the rotation that is still a bit concerning. It is potential, but not a backbone and not a dependable difference maker in this rotation. And look, it's Major League Baseball. It's very hard to win games without good pitching, without elite pitching, let alone good pitching. If you don't have good pitching, you're going to have some serious problems. And I question whether or not the Athletics have that, which is why I am still hesitant to pick them to go to the playoffs and pick them to be a contender, because it is above average arms in this rotation. Luis Severino, Jeffrey Springs, Jacob Wilson. There's really nothing special as of now, just an okay above average rotation across the board. But I did like some of the veterans they added to be back end starters and some relief pitching. And I also think that a common characteristic for a lot of these breakout teams is part of the reason why they're considered breakout teams is because they don't have the pitching, and they just proved to have the pitching during the season. We saw that with the Baltimore Orioles a few years ago. So I understand that the A's are in a very tough division, and they have a lot of question marks in the bullpen, especially now with Mason Miller no longer there. He was traded at last year's deadline. But they have such a talented offense, and I'm just intrigued about what could take place in technically Sacramento this year. Do not be surprised if the A's are the breakout team of 2026, because they have a really, really talented offense. And if their pitching could be just a tiny bit more consistent than they have been, I think this is an A's team that is going to win 80-plus games and contend for a postseason position come September. And last but not least, I told you New York fans, you had to listen up. Mets fans, I don't think the New York Mets are a World Series contender. I think the New York Mets are a bit overrated heading into 2026. Let me get this straight. This is still a team that can make the playoffs. I probably have them in the playoffs. I have them as about a fringe playoff team, and I'll break down where I rank them in the NL in just a second. I'm just not buying into World Series hype potential. And that is what seemingly most analysts and most fans believe that the Mets could be this year, just because they made many pieces. And let me get the record straight, right? Yankees didn't make many pieces or make many moves or add many pieces. I'm not saying that's always the best option either. If you have something that works, don't disrupt that. But the Yankees, again, I think it's not sustainable for it to work long term, and I broke that down. But for the Mets, there were way too many moving pieces this offseason, and I understand making changes after having one of the highest payrolls in MLB history and missing the playoffs. But it's really only Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, and Francisco Alvarez back with the New York Mets as starters this year in this lineup. And again, I understand they needed to retool. I just didn't like the moves they made in the offseason as a whole. You trade Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Semien. That doesn't make sense to me. Nimmo, 92 RBIs last year, a decent hitter for contact. Semien is 3 years older and arguably is coming off the worst season of his career in a decade, maybe more, one could argue. And so I don't love that move as a whole. Now, they also lost Pete Alonso, which is losing a lot of power. We're going to break down how they replaced him in just a second. And it felt like they kept losing pieces, and so they had to make the splash, and they brought in Bo Bichette. And trust me, I love Bo Bichette. I've always been a big fan of his. I think he had the best season of his career last year, but it was also in a contract year. Will that be able to carry over to New York? And also, will he be able to be compatible with Francisco Lindor at the shortstop spot? He's going to have to play third base. Uncharacteristic there. We saw at the beginning of spring training some clips that may have indicated that he may have some troubles in the field. And let me get this straight. I don't hate their lineup. They have a ton of talent in this lineup. But part of my issue is they had a ton of talent in their lineup last year, and I don't think this lineup is better than last year's team was. Bo Bichette is great if you're going star power for star power. I'm not quite sure he's better than Pete Alonso. They're probably similar players, all things considered, with Bichette's incredible contact and Alonso's elite power. That's not much of an improvement. You essentially got rid of Brandon Nimmo in the outfield and Jeff McNeil at second base for Luis Robert in the outfield and Marcus Semien at second base. Luis Robert's coming off of an awful season. That's certainly not an improvement. I don't think Marcus Semien is better than Jeff McNeil. It's closer than Nimmo to Robert is, but I still like Jeff McNeil a little bit more. So I guess my problem is I understand they made some great moves in the rotation. I love bringing in Freddie Peralta, but then even in the bullpen, Edwin Diaz has really been a consistent commodity at that closer spot. Again, the one season in 2023, having to have surgery, and he was out for the season. But Devin Williams, you bring in as the closer after that season with the Yankees? Seriously? I'm not buying into the vision because, again, I think this Mets team may be a little bit better than last year's with some of the retools they made because I like their rotation a little bit more. It has a lot more depth to me. However, with a lineup that for me is worse, why should we expect a team that last year won 83 games with one of the highest payrolls in MLB history and couldn't make the playoffs in a really weak NL wildcard field last year for a team that didn't make that many improvements, all things considered? They made a lot of moves, but not a lot of improvements. Why should I think that team that won 83 games last year and doesn't look much better to me now on paper is going to take that massive jump into World Series contention? I don't see it. And trust me, I'm cheering for the Mets. They're a fun team to cheer for in the National League as a Baltimore Orioles fan. Love their stadium, love their culture, love their mentality. Been to that stadium so many times. Complete respect for their fan base. They haven't won much. I appreciate that as someone who's an Orioles and a Wizards fan myself. This is not me hating on the New York Mets. I'm rooting for the New York Mets in the National League because I think they're a team that could have a lot of success. But I talked about how this team's not much better than last year's team, if it is. I still think if you compare them to other NL teams, obviously the Dodgers are better. I think the Phillies are better. I don't think it's that close. I think Atlanta still has a better roster and will finish with a better record this year if everybody stays healthy. And I think Milwaukee certainly can be better. I see them as the NL Central champions. So there's four teams. I don't see the Mets anything higher than a fifth or sixth seed if they're in the NL playoff field. And so again, I think the Mets could contend for a World Series. However, a lot of things would need to go right. And I think the moves that they made, partially on their own and partially because they were forced to with losing guys like Alonso, I don't think the Mets got much better this offseason, and they won 83 games and missed the playoffs last season. So what exactly is the point A to point B progression that'll take them from missing the playoffs to legitimate World Series contention? Until I see that actually play out on the field and show that and have that be displayed on a field, I'm not trusting what the New York Mets did this offseason. Plus, I know there are a lot of moving pieces, so it's a little bit different, but we see it a lot where teams who play really poorly the second half of a season, that bleeds into the next season. Again, it's a new core, so we'll see if the similar story rings true. But I don't think this team got better at all, and they won 83 games last year. So I need to see it to believe it with this New York Mets team if I want to put them in legitimate World Series contention. Hope you guys did enjoy this edition where I broke down my three biggest MLB hot takes ahead of the 2026 MLB season. And stay tuned the next few days for a full breakdown of my official MLB season predictions. I'm going to break down my division standings, who I actually do have making the playoffs, who I do have winning each award, etc., etc. And again, stay tuned for so much baseball content. Stay tuned for some announcements. And guys, I'm not going to lie to you, it is the best time of year. I absolutely love baseball season. And being in the Northeast, the weather is getting warmer and there's a lot more excitement. End of the school year, summertime, and of course that coincides with baseball, one of the best sports in the world. So I'm so excited for our baseball coverage this season. Again, please be sure to subscribe. Baseball coverage, March Madness, NFL, NBA. We're doing it all over here on Chase's Sports News. You're not going to want to miss anything. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Signing off, I'm your host, Chase Coburn, saying so long with my three biggest hot takes of the MLB season ahead of 2026.